PK52, the Saturday morning meeting, continuing on with Camry and Camry features and benefits. So let me break away and let's do a little bit of safety. Got a good friend that's been running dealerships and been in the business his whole life. Works up there in Cleveland, Barry Greenfield. And you know, a long time ago, Barry said, you know, when a salesperson comes to me, the very first thing that I teach them is the STAR safety system. Because it doesn't matter who you are and where you drive, eventually safety comes into play. So it's one of those presentations where no customer will ever tell you that I'm not interested. They may not be interested in leather or the size of the trunk or how many people will fit in the back seat, but everybody driving a car needs to know about the safety and the ability of the car to be able to make them a better driver. So it's all about the presentation with safety. Just regurgitating the numbers and telling somebody that it has ABS or it has traction control is not enough. It's a situational sell. So in your investigation, either prior to the customer coming in or in the first few minutes, what is the main driving habit of the customer? Are they commuting back and forth to work? Do they live inner city and drive a short distance? Do they travel long trips several times a year? Do they live outside the city and commute in every day on toll roads, across bridges, in major traffic where it seems like everybody left too late and are all in a hurry and making bad decisions at all time? Do you live in a part of the country where weather destroys the highways, where there's potholes and broken asphalt, or do you commute via interstate or beltways or loops around the city where there may be a giant recap of a semi-tractor trailer laying in the middle of the road? So all of these things become real at that one moment that they happen. So STAR safety system this week, and I know it's old school and I know we've been talking about it for a while, but believe it or not, I've been in the business long enough that all of the stuff that I'm about to talk about weren't on any car when I started selling Toyotas. So the first thing is anti-lock brakes. You know, what is the purpose of ABS? In the beginning, it was all about not locking the car up. Cars had a tendency to plow. When you would put on the brakes in a turn, it would end up going straight or pushing or understeer, and the car would go into the guardrail, the car would go off the road. Something came out in front of you, a deer, any kind of wildlife, and all of a sudden you made a lock-up decision with the brakes, and now you had no control of the steering wheel. So initially ABS was all about controlling the car. A pulsation of the brakes so that the brakes didn't lock the wheels up, and once that car gets to skid, then you have no control over the car. So it was all about controlling the car under duress of heavy braking. But ABS is so much more now, because the base root of ABS controls virtually everything that we have in the STAR safety system, TSS and TSSP. The better the ABS, the bigger the brake rotor, the more surface the brake pads can cover on the rotor, all enhance the ability of the car to be able to save your life, create a situation where there's not a crash. And you have to ask yourself, the best question of all time is, how many times does this have to work before it's worth the investment to buy a Toyota with these standard safety features? We're on summertime right now, but after summer, where everybody gripes about how hot it is, we all start griping about how cold it is, because winter's coming. And in virtually every part of the United States, I mean, I've been in Phoenix before when there's snow. You're talking about a group of people living in a part of the country that aren't ready for ice and snow to be on the highway. That would be the state of Arizona. But it happens. And how do I get going? I live in a mountainous state. I live in an area like Texas where really you don't get snow, you get ice. And I mean, it's like driving a car on a skating rink. So how do I get going? And the traction control, how does it work? Well, what happens is if you start spinning a wheel and you add more acceleration, you're not moving. And so the best way to describe it is, my favorite way to describe it is, you got this giant 4,000+ pound big piece of steel and 4 little tire patches, and you're trying to make the car go on a very slick surface. So the big cousins at Thanksgiving way back in the day when all the families used to get together for the holidays. Grandma looked at all of them and said, hey, all you big boys over there, go take the big dining table and push it over to this side of the room. Well, I don't know what tree this was made out of, some giant oak tree, or maybe they chopped up a huge wooden vessel that came across from England back in the day. But this table weighs 10 billion metric tons. And everybody starts trying to push it straight, and it won't move at all. So in order to move the table across the room, you push it to the left, then you push it to the right, you pull it to the left, and you pull it to the right, and you tack it like a sailboat. So once you move it side to side, then you can make the trip across the room. And what happens with traction control is, as this wheel starts to spin, the brakes slow this wheel down. And brakes can slow wheel rotation, as I've said for years, and as that wheel slows down, the brakes begin to bind it, which makes traction control shift power to the other wheel. Because power will always go to the wheel that freely spins or the wheel that's slipping, so the brakes trick the system and it sends the traction control across the tires. So on a front wheel drive, it works that way, side to side, moving the car in a tacking situation. On an all-wheel drive, both axles work independently, and obviously you're going to pay more money for a car that features an all-wheel drive and all four wheels being able to be used with traction control. But primarily the traction control allows the vehicle to be able to be moved when without it, then you'd be stuck. So very simple, but find out what the customer does for work, how they drive the car. I mean, there's a lot of people in America that live on dirt roads or gravel roads. And so you can actually take this particular safety feature and weld it into the way you said you drove earlier. Let me show you the effects of traction control and how we've elevated this system to be able to make it better for you to drive your car on a daily basis. So pin it to the customer and tailor it to the specific need. The next thing I'll talk about is vehicle stability control. And everybody's gone into a turn too fast. You're distracted when you're driving, or you're in an unfamiliar area and you look up and you're going like, oh man, there's my exit, and you whip across a couple of lanes. People let you know that you shouldn't have done that, and those are all the people that help us be educated on the proper way to drive with their horns. And you enter this 45-mile-an-hour turn at 75 or 80 miles an hour. The problem is now you've got to slow the car down enough to make the turn. Well, the way that stability control works is it realizes the wheel speed and the steering wheel position and the throttle position, and it can actually physically figure out mathematically that what you're doing in the car right now is really not going to turn out great for you. So it can actually decelerate the car by starving the throttle of air. So whoa, slowing the car down. Because if you slow the car down enough, then you're able to make the turn. If necessary, without your foot leaving the accelerator, the brakes can actually be applied. And think about this. You can actually drive a vehicle that doesn't have a steering wheel if it's got two brake levers. If I'm driving straight down the road and I pull the brake lever on the right side, the vehicle is going to turn to the braking side of the wheels. So by braking these wheels, it hooks the car to the right. By braking this wheel, it hooks the car to the left. So they've used this skid steer, how I steer a tank. They've used this method in the brakes to be able to say, this is where you point in the steering wheel. That's where you want to go by applying the right brake right here that hooks the car to your destination. Think about this. You're in a panic situation, or a brand new driver in the family. A 16-year-old is in the car, 3 other friends, they're very distracted. They get into a turn and all of a sudden they realize, man, this turn is way sharper than I meant for it to be. And all of a sudden the car takes over, it beeps at you and says, hey, by the way, I'm helping you not run into this guardrail. So that you have to call your parents and say, hey, we're okay because the car is super safe. It's a Toyota. However, the car can't be driven anymore. For every child, that's a bad phone call. Well, you know what? Here's a feature that may keep that from happening. So what I've described is parents buying a car and saying, oh, by the way, my 16-year-old son or daughter will be driving this car when they have the car. So why don't we make the car safer for an inexperienced driver to be able to come home every night alive, safe, and without damaging the car. Think about the STAR safety system. ABS, EBD, brake assist, electronic brake force distribution, right? Vehicle stability control, traction control. Let's go into electronic brake force distribution. You got somebody buying a Sienna minivan. Well, most people don't buy that because they're single and they are just going to date big. What they do is they buy that because either they're going to load a lot of cargo, do some trips, or they're going to be in a situation where they've got a lot of kids or passengers in the van. Every time you change the weight of any vehicle, doesn't matter what it is, you change the dynamics of the braking. So I load up 4 kids in the back of the van, 2 adults in the front, and then all the cargo for the soccer trip this weekend. Coolers, ice buckets, soccer equipment, and lounge chairs. I mean, everything that you need to spend a day at the soccer field. Now you've unbalanced the vehicle. Electronic brake force distribution can measure the change in the weight of the vehicle by using the wheel speed RPM indicators, and it can change the braking prowess from front to back. If there's more weight in the back, it can add more braking ability to the rear wheels because there's more grip on those wheels now. With just a driver in a Sienna minivan, when you stop, virtually all the energy goes to the front wheels because everything moves forward when you start to brake, and it would be able to use those front brakes more efficiently, so it can move it front to back. There is a lateral gravitational sensor built into this van, so it can actually shift brakes side to side based upon the load. If you're turning left, then your load goes to the outside wheels or the right wheels. So think about this. I'm taking your kids on a 4-hour soccer trip. You're not going. I'm in a Sienna minivan. Let me assure you, not only can I drive, but the van can actually improve my ability to create a safe environment for your child. The last thing is brake assist, and we've talked about this forever. You guys know that my wife has just had a big motorcycle crash. She's got really no ability to even bend her right leg at the time. She's in a brace. She's got some heavy road abrasion on her knee, and she's walking with a limp. So the reality is she shouldn't be driving a car. She certainly shouldn't be driving my big giant Tundra. But she's got to go. She's got to go do this, she's got to do that, she's got to run errands. I'm out of town. She can't just sit at the house. So she limps out to the vehicle. She grabs onto the handles, pulls herself up into the Tundra, not being able to flex her knee at all, and certainly not being able, with a torn ACL and MCL, to be able to strike the brake pedal with enough force to actually stop the Tundra. That's the dynamics of brake assist. Because the braking system is so aware of the driver. If she rapidly strikes the brake pedal, and again, I'm telling you, it's not enough strength to hammer the brake pedal to the floor, but if her intent, moving her foot from the accelerator to the brake, tells the computer system that this is a rapid strike, some of you call it a panic strike, then the brakes have the ability to say, let me add some extra brake assist to make sure this is going to be a safe situation. So do I worry about her driving with a bad knee right now? Of course I do. Am I glad she's driving a Toyota? Absolutely. The dynamics of your presentation make all the difference in the world. It's not just a feature. It's how that a feature applies to that customer in a situation that they're in multiple times, or maybe a trip where they're driving on an unfamiliar road surface. Raise the level of your presentation. Raise the impact of the benefit of what our engineers have designed. Again, old school week, talking about safety, STAR safety system. Stay tuned. You know I'm going to talk about TSS and TSSP. KC next, PK52, the Saturday morning meeting.